Na mô tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Na mô tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Na mô tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhang dhammang sanghang namasami. Blessings, good evening, good afternoon. One of the themes that pervades the Buddhist teachings and also the teachings of Ajahn Chah, my teacher, was the emphasis on living simply and cultivating patience with the difficulties and the different conditions you face, rather than always seeking ease and comfort in terms of material things and situations. Ajahn Chah had a phrase he would quote quite often. Mak ngai dai yak, lambak dai di. Means it's the easy way, it's difficult to get the result that you want, maybe. The hard way brings good things. And that's just a saying, so I mean it's not always applicable or may be open to interpretation, but it's a reminder that one of the basic problems we face as humans is we're always looking for the comfortable, easy way. We want more material comfort around us, better accommodation and food and clothing, and of course more money so that we can fund all of that. And with relationships and basically dealing with our own desires and our own states of mind, we like to take the easy way if we can. We often don't want to face any hardship, don't want to feel frustrated, don't want to feel pressure, don't want to have to expend more time on things than we need to, which means we often take this sort of easy route in life, in many areas of our life, and that doesn't always lead to good results. Materially, well, material comfort tends to make us kind of weak in the mind, you might say. We go the path of least resistance, so if there's plenty of food and comfort and entertainment and distraction around us, well, we'll accept that. Whereas the spiritual life, you're pursuing inner peace and inner wisdom, inner compassion, these kind of inner qualities that come through practicing the Dhamma. They're not going to be found by pursuing material wealth so much and seeking the pleasures of the world. They come more through the practice of renunciation, letting go, restraint, discipline, mindfulness, wise reflection. They come about through a different set of causes and conditions. So for Sangha and even laity, Ajahn Chah used to encourage people to be frugal, to live simply, and to learn to put up with conditions rather than always complain or rush to seek the comfortable solution. Whether it's material things or with people as well. Say you're living as a monastic, you live in a community, so you live with different people, different characters, people from different backgrounds, people with different levels of barami. Some people seem to be very advanced, wise and advanced on their path of practice towards Nibbana. Some people seem to be struggling or with very only a small amount of barami, and some people are sort of ready to run from the monastery. They've had enough, maybe. But you've got to learn to live with them all, living in a monastery. Even in the lay life, you're born into the world. You don't necessarily choose who you're born to, in terms of parents and the family that you're born into and the people you associate with or meet along the way. You can't always choose them either. But often you have more escapes. If there's someone you don't like in your circle of friends, well, nowadays you just stop texting them or ringing them or meeting them, maybe. But in a monastery you can't necessarily avoid someone. You're just there as a group, whether it's a small group or a large group. So you have to learn how to live together. And that's not always easy. It's not always easy living with other people who have different habits than you and different ways of doing things. But the idea is, whether we're in the monastery or living as a layperson, we take the Dhamma, the practice of the Dhamma and Vinaya, as our basis for our lifestyle and what we're doing. And we have to learn how to be patient and, you might say, forgiving with each other in order to live together, in order to pursue a deeper level of practice in our life, deeper understanding, deeper peace, deeper levels of mindfulness and samadhi, and deeper insight. If you can't learn to live skillfully with the material world and with other people, society and the people around you, then it's quite difficult to pursue deeper insight and deeper understandings of the Dhamma and the truth, because you're too caught up with these external things first. So that's a big part of our life, as you might say, as Buddhists, just learning how to live wisely or skillfully with the world around us. But the Buddha gave us all the tools we need. You can find in his teachings that will help cover and guide you in each aspect of life. Let's say the sort of simple summary, if you're a layperson, perhaps the simple summary we use often is dana, sila, bhavana, the practice of generosity, morality, and bhavana, mental cultivation, or meditation is often how we translate it. This is the simple guide of what are we doing as a Buddhist. Once you have some faith in the Buddha as a wise, peaceful teacher, you have some confidence that what he taught may help you be successful in helping you to free yourself from stress and to live successfully and well as a human being. Once you've got confidence in that, well, obviously you want to know how to do it, how to practice. And this is the Buddha's most simple kind of guide. Practice generosity, live in a moral way where you're not harming others or yourself, and then cultivate your mind, cultivate calm and cultivate insight to experience inner happiness through abandoning craving and attachment, which he identified as the cause of suffering. Dana, sila, bhavana, very simple remedy for the human condition and the problems we face. I think most people listening to this probably already have an idea of dana. Most Buddhists will do dana in one form or another. We practice charity, generosity within the family, in our circle of friends, or in wider society, helping those maybe who need help, the sick, the poor, people in need, or just useful causes. And of course, supporting Sangha as well. I think most people understand that and probably practice that on one level or another already. Nevertheless, it's still good to review from time to time where you may need to improve your practice of generosity and remind yourself why, the value of it. In simple terms, you practice generosity. The Buddha said you generate a good feeling for yourself because it's a feeling of letting go, relinquishment, as opposed to the feeling that comes from acquiring, getting, which is, a big part of our life. It's difficult not to get caught up with acquiring, getting money and wealth, even though you could say it's necessary to live in the world. You need some kind of income or job in order to get the basics and the necessities of life. Very difficult not to get caught up into the acquiring mind, wanting more, wanting better. And of course, our consumer society is ready to support those kind of feelings and desires all the time. So we always find we're living with a sense of not enough, not satisfied, not good enough, I need a bit more, or something bigger, more, better. And there always is something new being produced that can satisfy us, we think, for a little while, until the next generation or the next model comes out, and then we're back to being discontent again. But if you do practice generosity, it's giving you this sense of, well, I've got enough to share. That's a very important kind of feeling to have as a human being. You may only have a little, but if you have that sense, I can share what I have, at least a little bit, with someone else, you feel good. You feel good about yourself. You feel good about them, good enough to share, to help in some way, whether it's a material thing or some kindness through words or some knowledge, some advice, whatever. If you can share with others, you get a good feeling for yourself. And the other thing the Buddha pointed out is the receiver also will generally feel good when they receive your help. They feel good, they appreciate it in one way or another. Usually that's the case. So it's good for us, good for others, and that's an important part of life. It's one kind of happiness, you could say. And it gives you this sense of contentment that I have enough to share. The opposite of the mind that is always wanting and wanting to get more, acquire more, possess more, have more, which is a mind of hunger. Maybe a physical hunger, literally you want to eat if you don't have food, or you want to eat more, or mental hunger just for new objects of the senses, new things, new experiences, new pleasures, new people, new places, and so on. But that's a hungry state of mind that's not very peaceful. It agitates the mind, it's discontent. Whereas the mind that's practicing, at least temporarily, the mind with the thought of generosity, is a mind that naturally is more sympathetic and kind towards others, more sensitive to others, maybe to their suffering, and a mind that says, I have enough to share. I've got enough time to share my time with someone, enough food or enough wealth in whatever way you're sharing to do that. So you feel that's something that it makes you feel good. It's just a fact of life. It's not you don't have to be seeking anyone else's approval, although sometimes that can slip into it. It's one of the dangers. But even if you're aware of that and you're not seeking anyone's approval, it's a good feeling to know that you've got enough for yourself and something for somebody else. And much of the time we have that. I sometimes tell the story about the amazing beggar in the big Bangkok temple who spent his life literally just sitting at the corner of one building, have his little spot, and as people would go past, he'd have his little tin can collecting money, donations, because he's just there, obviously a beggar dressed in rags, skinny man, and people would drop a coin or two in his a little pot. And so over the course of a day, he could get quite a few coins, quite a bit of money. And he just lived in a little shack made of pieces of old corrugated iron, and had very simple food, probably left over from the monks, and his clothing was just sort of rags and old clothes, but he could get by. And this went on for years. Meanwhile, in that temple, over the years, one of the main halls became old and broken down, so they had to pull it down and rebuild it, a meditation hall. And so during that period, lots of people came to the temple to do different events for fundraising, and they'd make offerings, and it was a big thing for a while to raise funds and then build the new hall. And meanwhile, the beggar is still there collecting his few coins every day. But towards the end of the project for the building of that hall, there was one day when they had the usual meal offering to the monks, and that was a time when often people would come in and do some offerings of funds towards the building of the new hall. One day, after everyone had come in, offered their food, offered their donations to the assembled monks, the beggar came in with a big plastic bag which looked very heavy. And he came in and he very humbly crawled up to the senior monk, bowed, and said, "I'd like to make my offering today." And everyone was surprised, all the visitors to the monastery, all the monks, because they knew this is a beggar who probably has nothing. So what's in this big bag and why is he here? And people had that doubt. And he said, "I want to make my donation. You're building the big hall, the building's coming along, now it's my turn to join in, to participate in the fundraising, and I want to offer these funds today." So he put his big plastic, heavy looking plastic bag down, and the monk leaned over and looked in and he saw it was full of coins and notes. And the monk said, "Well, what's this?" He said, "Oh, this is my spare change," the man said. And the monk was surprised because he's a beggar. He said, "This is what I've managed to save over the years, because I don't actually use very much. People give me more than I need. And I was saving it for a rainy day, as it were. But every day I sit in the corner of the temple yard doing my thing, collecting money as a beggar. But I see people going into the hall during the meal time and when they meet the monks and they make their donations, and they always go in and then they come out looking very happy that they've made their donation. It's like they've made their merit, made their good karma, and they feel happy. So when they come out, I can see that on their faces, because he's just sitting there observing the world every day. He doesn't do much else other than sit in his corner and look at people. So he sees that. He says, "I've always thought I want to feel happy like them. I want a piece of that happiness, or I want to experience that. So this is my chance." So he'd saved up all this money and put it in a tatty old plastic bag, dumped it in front of the monks, and later on when the attendant came along and counted it out, it turned out it was almost 1 million baht, which is a lot of money for anyone, let alone a beggar, which he put towards the building of the hall. And the monks gave a blessing, and the beggar went out very happy. And that was why he did it. He said, "I want to feel the happiness of giving, sharing." So even a beggar can do that. So it's clearly not simply a matter of how much you earn or who you are in society, as it were. It's more a matter of your mind. But that's why we practice generosity. We generate a good feeling for ourselves, for others. Even someone witnessing something like that feels happy, feels good, makes a good story to talk about. That's the happiness of generosity and charity. The other main practice the Buddha said we have to take on, following the Buddhist path, if we really want to experience the same kind of peace and happiness and wisdom of the Buddha, is the practice of moral restraint, we call sila, or precepts, which you hear about so much since you were a kid, if you're born into a Buddhist family, or since your first meditation retreat, if you come to Buddhism later in life. You hear about precepts all the time. And yet it's something we have to keep reminding ourselves because we forget. Why don't you keep precepts, or why do you fail to keep precepts? Well, we forget. We're not always perfectly mindful of our speech, our actions. And the precepts require attention to our speech and our actions. Really, we have to attend to our state of mind. What lies behind our actions is our intention, our thoughts. But with morality, with precepts, you're particularly taking on, you might say, a set of rules, guidelines, a moral code, what you might call the Vinaya, and that applies even for lay people. It's not just a thing for monks. You take on a moral code that you decide, I'm going to adhere to this or follow this. So that's your personal decision. It's not something anyone else can really impose on you. They might be able to just for a short period of time. Say, oh, we don't do that, we don't steal, we don't kill. But really, you have to take it on for yourself if you're going to do it successfully as part of the Buddhist practice towards enlightenment. You have to make that clear intention, I am going to refrain from killing, stealing, sexual misconduct, lying and abuse and false speech, and taking drink or drugs, alcohol or drugs that cloud the mind. You have to take that on for yourself, willingly, voluntarily, knowing the value of it or seeing the value of it. So again, that's something you have to sometimes from time to time remind yourselves why you keep the precepts, what are the benefits of it, what are the benefits. It brings you happiness, the freedom of regret, freedom of the sadness of the mind when you don't live in a moral way, when you do harm other people. Whenever you become aware of what you've said or done, it makes the mind a little sadder. Of course, sometimes we live in denial. We do things which harm ourselves or others, and we don't recognize it, or we hide it. But sooner or later, when the clouds part, your mind will notice what you've said and done. You'll remember it and you'll sense it, or maybe you get feedback from other people. And you'll notice the sadness that comes when you are, you might say, unrestrained, say and do things that hurt others and sometimes just hurt yourselves, or both. You can notice it saddens the mind. And that's because you've must have followed an intention that's unskillful, unwholesome. Akusala is the technical term, or bapa. Akusala dhamma means unwholesome dhamma, and it's always accompanied by an unpleasant feeling. That's why if you're thinking to kill, steal, commit acts of sexual misconduct, lie, insult, abuse someone, take drink or drugs, already the mind is not that comfortable with the idea of what's going to happen next. That could be just a split-second decision, or it may be something you plan over time. But your mind is not at ease. You kind of tense up because of the unpleasant feeling that accompanies the intention to do one of those things. That's just the law of nature, the Buddhists would say. It's not like somebody is there punishing you or waiting to punish you or commanding you. It's not some kind of guilt that you will feel because of something imposed on you by somebody else or something like that. It's just a natural law of the mind, you might say, human psychology. When you have the intention to do something that harms yourself or others, your mind is not at ease, it's not happy. But unfortunately, a lot of the time we don't see it, we don't even realize. We're too confused, too agitated. Sometimes it's covered over by our strongly held views and opinions, which actually suppress any kind of mental suffering that we might be experiencing, or agitation or tenseness. Maybe other people can notice it, but maybe we don't because of our strong view. We say, oh, what I'm doing is right, even though you may actually be harming yourself or harming others, making negative karma. So sometimes we don't see, we don't notice. But if you do start reflecting on your actions, become more aware, reflective, that's what you start to pick up. That's what most people find, or people who genuinely develop some mindfulness and insight into their own behavior, they start to pick up this fact, even killing a mosquito, you have a certain coarseness of mind to do that. Your mind is not feeling free, easy. Even though mosquitoes can be very annoying, or mice, or flies, or bugs, or termites, or probably the most common things we kill are insects and small creatures, occasionally bigger things. But if your mind has even just a moment's intention to deliberately kill, or even just to injure something, your mind is not feeling good. It feels uneasy. There's some regret, some sadness. So the more we observe that, we might decide, I'm going to take on the 5 precepts or even the 8 precepts. If you become more experienced, you take them on as your guidelines. Then what naturally happens is you become much more sensitive to your behavior, quicker, sharper to identify when you have negative intentions. When they pop into the mind, you notice them because they're not in line with the precepts you've decided to keep. Again, there's no one else telling you. I mean, this can happen as well. So if you're in a monastery and you start killing, well, probably one of the monks will say, this is a monastery, probably you shouldn't be killing here. But still, more likely and more often, and in the end, it's essential that you get to the point where you say it to yourself, oh, this is not a way to go, this is cause of suffering. And you find you get 2 qualities arise, what we call hiri and ottappa. Hiri is sense of shame, just to do a certain action or say those words doesn't feel good, doesn't feel right. There's something unwholesome, unskillful in them. So the sense of shame, the idea is the sense of shame makes you very sensitive, and you want to steer away or avoid saying or doing that action. And then also a fear of the consequences. You don't do something because you know it's going to hurt you, hurt others, there'll be consequences, unpleasant consequences, some form of suffering. You know that, so you steer away from it. So these 2 qualities, hiri ottappa, are like the guardians, the guardian deva in your own mind, the voice in your own mind that says, are you sure you want to do that? Are you sure you want to say that? And be careful, be more restrained, be more mindful. In the end, although you may begin by having those words from someone else, your teacher or your parent or some friend, the idea is you begin to internalize them, and you have your own voice that wants you to steer away from doing things that will lead to regret or sadden your mind, just make you feel sad to think about what you've said and done. So you can see the practice of dana, generosity, then the practice of morality. It's a gradual refining of one's wisdom and awareness, mindfulness and wisdom, because you have to be more clear in your intentions and what you're doing. You can practice dana, generosity, but not keep precepts. And some people, they can be quite generous and helpful to others in many ways, but they don't keep the precepts. So what might happen for them is they reach a point where they think, I'm practicing this generosity, but I'm not as happy as I think I should be. And usually they can connect. It's probably because they're not keeping the precepts or not living in a very moral way. But even if you keep the precepts and you're becoming more aware of your intentions, what are wholesome, what are unwholesome, you're more aware of the results of your actions, so you start to steer away from unskillful actions. what happens then is you realize, well, you still have the root causes of different kinds of suffering, unskillful mind states, negative thoughts, negative intentions. They're still there in your mind, even if you're keeping the precepts. You can restrain yourself from speaking in anger and being rude to someone, insulting someone, or telling a lie, or stealing somebody's stuff, or whatever. You may be able to restrain yourself from doing that, but you probably become aware that you may still have the intention there. Sometimes it will come up. You're tempted to do something, to cheat on your partner, to steal something of value that comes your way that no one would know about if you stole, for example. Those sort of moments where you're tempted may come up, and you'll notice there's still some greed there, there's still some aversion there, there's still some fuzziness of mind, some delusion. I'm not always fully aware of what I'm thinking, what I'm doing. You'll probably start to notice that. And that's why the Buddha said you also have to cultivate Bhavana to really free your mind from the causes of suffering. We cultivate Bhavana, development of the mind on the level of mindfulness. Probably the heart of Bhavana is cultivating mindful awareness from moment to moment through our day, every day. And then insight through reflecting, observing the truth, reflecting on the truth. These two qualities are the sort of the heart of Bhavana. And we have to develop them or intensify our practice of them, particularly through meditation, sitting, walking meditation. But not only through meditation, also just from developing general mindfulness and awareness in daily life, and reflecting on what we're doing, contemplating things, contemplating our state of mind from moment to moment through our day. This is Bhavana as well. And cultivating calm and insight, mindfulness and insight, that's something you can do in any posture, any time, with anyone, whether you're on your own, with others. Doesn't matter. The important thing is you have to see that in order to really root out the root causes of our stress, suffering, unhappiness, the greed that leads us to constantly be seeking to acquire more wealth and seek more pleasures, or the aversion that often leads us to fall out with other people or dislike other people and hurt others through our speech, our actions. The greed, the anger, we realize after a while, I really need to be much more mindful internally to root these out. Precepts alone, morality alone is good, but it's not enough to really purify your mind or free your mind from suffering. It becomes like a basis for developing a more refined, sharper level of mindfulness and insight. And that's why we do need to practice some meditation. And this applies whether you're a monk, a nun, layman, laywoman, woman, wherever you are, whoever you are, doesn't matter. The human mind, the starting point of our life really is we keep getting affected by or conditioned by ignorance. We're not always fully aware. We're not always wise, compassionate, peaceful. We have those moments perhaps, but we also have moments of the opposite, when we're foolish, selfish, deluded, caught up in aversion and not particularly kind or compassionate. We have those moments as well, and I think you probably already noticed them. That's why you're here, that's why you're interested in the Buddhist teachings. So what are we going to do with that, about them? Well, this is where the practice of Bhavana, cultivation of, you might say, body, speech and mind in a wholesome, skillful way comes about. That's why we need it. So one who's on the Buddhist path, cultivating their actions, their speech, their mind in the way of Bhavana, really is someone who's cultivating the sense of always being one practicing. Everything becomes part of the practice. Nothing is not part of the practice. if you're anything like me, when I began practicing meditation, reading about Buddhism, practicing Buddhism, I always had this sense of when you meditate, you're practicing. When you stop meditating, you're sort of on holiday, which is a very dangerous way to, if you're really wanting to train your mind, it's a dangerous way to be, because on holiday means anything goes. So you might put a lot of effort into meditating for a period of time, 20 minutes, 30 minutes, 1 hour, whatever you manage. But then the rest of the time it doesn't matter. You can think what you want, do what you want, say what you want, and so much of the time we say and do things that are harmful to ourselves, to others, and take away whatever peace and insight we might have developed in our meditation. So we have this experience of sort of back and forth, or up and down, sometimes peaceful, and then you sort of slip back. We say snakes and ladders. You go up a bit and then you slip back down again, because we're not with the sense of practicing all the time. We go on holiday, and when you're on holiday, often you do foolish things, and you make your mind go in the wrong direction. You're not so careful with what you're thinking and saying and doing. And then when you come back to meditate the next time, you're kind of back to square one. It's like, oh, my mind has been all over the place. Why wasn't I more careful to, sometimes we have suffering, and then we come to meditate and we realize, oh, I really blew it. I've said too much. I did the wrong thing. You see all the regrets that come when you realize how lacking in mindfulness and wisdom you were in your daily life, perhaps. So the idea is, as you practice meditation, you start to kind of spread it out into your daily life. The qualities you develop in Bhavana, the mindfulness and the reflective power to develop some wisdom, see the impermanent nature of thoughts and moods and intentions, to see the changing nature of your body, the changing nature of the world, insight, and even insight into not self, seeing that you don't really own the things that you often think you own, and this sense of self that likes to form around your experience is a delusion. Even that, you can start to develop insight into these things even in daily life. I remember one meditation teacher told me when I was a layman, he said, do you have a job? And at that time I had a part-time job. I was still studying, but I also had a part-time job. And I said, yeah, I do this job, and when I go to work I just can't be mindful, and it's difficult to think of even anything Buddhist, because no one else around me is Buddhist, and nobody else keeps the precepts, and no one is practicing mindfulness. It's so hard. And he said what he did, because he also worked as a daytime job, as it were, he said he took the practice of just reflecting on impermanence with him to work. So he'd go to work, and he knew he couldn't always be mindful, didn't always keep the precepts so perfectly, but he'd reflect on change and impermanence. And he said he'd go into work in the morning and he'd reflect, this is the beginning of the day, but later in the day I'll go home. The end of the working day, it will come later on. This day, this work I do, it's impermanent. He said that helped him not to get too many, not to build up too many disappointments or aversions to the job, because the job we were doing was actually not a very nice job. I won't go into the details of the job, but myself and this other guy had a similar attitude. Didn't really like the work we did, but we had to do it. So he would say, just go and reflect. It's impermanent. You start the job, later you'll finish. Everything has a beginning, everything has an end. I found that very helpful. And then he also said, one day you won't be doing this job. One day other people won't be doing this job. If there's someone in this job that you like, remind yourself one day they won't be there. If there's someone in this job you don't like, one day they won't be there. Remember that as well. Remember that everyone who works in this place is getting older every day. Their body changes through aging. Sometimes they get sick, and eventually they will die. That applies to everyone here or everyone in your workplace. I found that really helpful because I knew I couldn't be perfectly mindful and I wasn't always able to keep precepts, but that reflection really brought me to see the Dhamma in what I was doing. And at that time I had the thought to eventually to become a monk, and it gave me some inspiration and kept me going because I knew, oh, this job, yeah, I won't be doing this forever. So sometimes in daily life, Bhavana means just introducing the wisdom of the Buddha in different situations. If you can be mindful, all the better. Mindful of your intentions, knowing whether they're wholesome or not, keeping the precepts, being mindful of the precepts, being mindful to practice generosity, all of this is good. But also bring in some of the wisdom of the Buddha. Everything is subject to change. You are changing your mind, your state of mind changes, your body, your physical body is changing. The world around you is always constantly changing. Everything is impermanent, nothing lasts, nothing stays the same. That much wisdom can save you an awful lot of suffering in daily life. Because of course, when we're not mindful, we do get into states of suffering. We regret the things we've said and done. We get frustrated with our desires. We want something and we haven't got it yet, or other people are blocking the way to our success or getting what we want. Of course, we get frustrations, disappointments, and so on. But if you bring up this reflection, everything is impermanent, nothing stays the same, it may help you through those moments when you're suffering. Just as you can make a mistake, you can also rectify the mistake and determine to not make the same mistake again. Learn a lesson, see what you need to do, learn from some situation that's arisen or something you've done or said. You can learn, you can change. Disappointments don't have to stay in your mind forever. It's something that's prompting you to look harder at what you need to do to be peaceful, to be happy. Anger is the same. Anger comes up, you can reflect, this won't stay the same. This angry thought, angry feeling will arise, it will pass away. Maybe you can learn what triggers your anger, maybe make a few adjustments. But seeing the impermanence of it will help you do that. Otherwise, if you can't see impermanence, you tend to believe and buy into every mood, every thought when it comes up. And you suffer twice as much, don't you? You just think that's it, that's me, that's who I am. You're not seeing not self, you're not seeing anatta at that moment. And you walk around maybe making yourself miserable. You're angry, and then you're angry because you're angry, and then you start looking at your life and say, oh, my life is no good. I'm angry, I'm depressed, this is bad, that's wrong. I'm making a simplification here, but it's that kind of one thing leads to another. Often we go in a downward spiral and suffer more. If you introduce the thought, this won't last, this will change, maybe that will help you at that moment. So the practice of bhavana, or meditation, isn't simply sitting on your meditation cushion, although that is a very good way to develop it. It also means developing skillful attitudes in daily life. As you travel to work, go to work, come home from work, as you socialize with people, as you do the different things you do, you can reflect on impermanence, the unsatisfactory nature of life. Your life is sometimes difficult, but if you reflect on these difficulties, then maybe you can learn something from that. And learn about cause and effect. Even though sometimes you experience suffering, there's causes for the suffering, and the suffering can also be abandoned, let go of, and finished with. When the causes change, the experience of suffering will change. Rather than taking everything personally, you may reflect, this went wrong, or I'm not feeling too good now. Could be physical pain or some mental anguish, despair. But don't take it so personally as being you. It's more like a mental state, experience of suffering that comes and goes, according to causes and conditions. Everyone can reflect like this. You don't yet have to be an expert meditator, but maybe you introduce some Buddhist wisdom into your daily life. It can help you to let go, to not be so hard on yourself if you're being hard on yourself, not to cause yourself so much stress and suffering in different situations. Sometimes it's other people, isn't it? We take the words and the actions of other people too seriously or attach to them too much. So if someone says a few words of criticism, you don't like that person, and then you start feeling bad or upset because of what they said. But again, you can use the same wisdom in your daily life. Everything's impermanent. What they say today, they may say something different tomorrow. Maybe their words are true, maybe they're not true. Nothing is sure, nothing is certain, nothing is permanent. Reflect like this, and maybe you won't take it so personally. Maybe that person doesn't understand you, and what they're saying is totally out, not in line with the truth at all, because they're just saying something that they believe, but they don't know you and your life. That's quite common, isn't it? Sometimes we have to be careful we don't do that ourselves. How often do we start criticizing other people because we think we know the way they are and what they've done, and we may get it totally wrong. So just as other people do it to us, we may do it to them. It's not certain, nothing lasts, everything can change, everything is impermanent. So the practice of introducing Buddhist wisdom into your thinking, into your attitudes in daily life can help a lot. You may not be perfectly mindful, you may not be able to keep the precepts perfectly yet, but you can bring up some wisdom just to help you deal with the sort of ups and downs and challenges of daily life. So just a few reflections today on the Buddhist practice of generosity, morality, meditation. This is the heart of what the Buddha taught us to develop. Not always easy. It doesn't mean you're always following your moods, following your desires. Sometimes you have to go against them and let go of them. But it's the way to training the mind and to experiencing deeper inner peace, inner happiness. So I'll leave you with these reflections for now, and afterwards, if anyone has any questions, feel free.